Hello and welcome to Non-Inkables. This will be probably the last segment of the TCG Terms. So there's 2 prior TCG Terms videos. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. I think this will be the last one because I haven't learned very many new words to go over. And they're I feel like these videos are kind of in order of most used to least used. So this would be the least used ones, but things that I have heard as I continue into this foray into TCGs, really just learn but words that I have heard. So let's start. Dead card. It is a card that is in your hand that is irrelevant or unplayable. For example, if you have a card that is uninkable and you don't have enough ink to play it and you don't have any other cards to ink, that would be a dead card. Another card that would be a dead card is like maybe you have a card that is very used only in one specific instance and so doesn't really help in any other instance. So for example, like if you have a item removal card and they don't have any items, it's a dead card. Next phrase is decking them out, also sometimes called wheeling or milling. And it's basically you make them draw cards until they have no more cards to draw and then because they can't draw. So this is usually done by either a Amber Steel card or Amber Steel deck singing A Whole New World or HFR deck singing A Whole New World. Basically anyone singing A Whole New World, this will happen. There are other ways I think for this to happen, but it hasn't really become popular within Lorcana yet, but it is definitely a thing. Next would be digging, and that means that they are basically digging through their deck. So they're looking through their deck for a specific card. So the Sapphire decks will do this a lot. So they'll use things like Develop Your Brain, A Vision of the Future, Grammatala, How Far I'll Go. Even the card Dig a Little Deeper is basically this. You are digging through the deck to look for a specific card. Next that you'll hear a lot is draw engine. People say like, oh, what's the draw engine in this deck? Blah, 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 right? So your draw engine is the way that you draw cards. So there are a lot of options depending on what color. So normally Amethyst people would say has best draw engine. And so before it was just bouncing your rabbit to draw you cards. You could put people in Castle. You could put people in Library and they get banished and that draws you cards. You could play Magic Broom and get that banished. That draws you cards. Churnabogs draws you cards. Now there's Genie that draws you cards. You could bounce Genie and that could also draw you more cards. And so Amethyst, that's one of the ways. Friends on the other side, of course, draws you cards. So that is your draw engine in Amethyst. In Sapphire, your draw engine is usually Hiram. Banish an item, draw 2 cards. It could also be, like, for example, we played the items deck last set. And so our draw engine was Maurice's Workshop. So that allows you to play an item. If you play an item, you pay an ink, you can draw a card. So you combo that with Queen, that lets you play items for free. Now you have Oswald, that lets you also play items for free. You combo that with Maurice's Workshop, and that could be your draw engine. You might not even need Hiram in that deck. Another draw engine would, so like Emerald draw engine would probably be Diablo, right? That could be a draw engine. When your opponent draws, you draw. Prince John, you discard their card, you draw a card. In Steel, Beast is a good draw engine. Tragic Hero. And in Amber, Rapunzel, Julieta, those would be 2 draw engines. Basically, you heal, you get cards. So an important thing to think about for your deck is how you're going to draw cards so that you can play cards. Next is EV. So that is expected value. So sometimes that you can hear that when people talk about, say, like the EV of a certain set. So like if the resale value is good on the set, it could also refer to like the pricing of a certain event versus what the entry fee is. If it is good EV, like it means you get like pretty good prizes for the amount of money you pay. So for example, Fanimage used to have sealed for $30 and you get pack per win. So that was pretty good EV because the $30 basically covers the cards you get for sealed, the 6 packs. And then you get pack per win. So any win is like a benefit. You can also sometimes talk about EV. You're talking about deck building, like how good is the card? Will you get like value out of that card when you play it? Next would be gas. So that refers to cards that you would want to draw that are relevant and fuel your game plan. So a lot of times people will say this in terms of like, oh, this deck runs out of gas. Or like basically at the end of the game, you're low on resources, you run out of gas. So like maybe you are real hot in the beginning of the game, but if it gets later, it's not as good. So I think like hyper aggro is like that, where in the beginning, lots of gas. And then you get past turn 5, you haven't won yet. It's a little more iffy. Another term that I think I already talked about this in one of the other Lorcana basic videos, but it is the term gold fishing. And so that is when you are practicing and you basically play a hypothetical opponent that doesn't do anything until defeated. And it would maybe be how like a level 1 player would play. So if you look at my levels video, it's basically like you're playing basically like, oh, I have this much ink. I will play this card because it costs this much ink, which is how I used to play and how I play when I'm tired. Another word you'll hear is a grinder, not to be confused with the dating app Grinder, but it is a person who plays game after game to get qualifying points. So I think this was more in terms of like Magic. You got to get a certain number of points to qualify for Pro League or something. And then people also say like, oh, you just have to grind out games. So this kind of happened, I think, when we were all playing on Pixelborn in the beginning, like pre-webcam Pixelborn or Real Play Connect. Basically, like you just play a lot to increase your ranking on those things. You can do it now, I guess, in Lorcanito. You play, but I mean, part of it is you still have to win. So it's not just like you can just play a lot of games and lose and it be counted as grinding, but basically sometimes to get to those higher ranks, you just have to play a lot based on like how they calculate your MMR or ELO. Oh, speaking of, let us define those terms. So MMR, I just had to look this up because I actually don't know what that stands for. Because to me, MMR is measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. But MMR is matchmaking ranking. So it is a rating system that's kind of behind the scenes, and it is the goal of the MMR is to match people with similar skill levels. And then ELO is a rating system that is also kind of similar. It's used to calculate the relative skill levels of people, and it was invented for chess and kind of adapted for esports and now TCG. And they're basically both ways to kind of, the people who are good will get points and then they'll kind of, their like score will go up, and then match people with similar scores and they should be of similar levels. Okay, next is Jank. So there was actually somebody, I think that Brian played in Seattle, whose like screen name was like all jank or something like that. And Brian was like, his deck was not all jank, it was meta. But jank basically refers to either a card or a deck that's not very good. So one of our locals, he played in set 4 a green steel deck that was not like the standard like Bucky discard, because he also had some like aggro in it. And he would always call it like, oh, this is my jank deck. Like it doesn't have this deck doesn't have a focus. It's just like, I want to do a little aggro, I want to do a little discard. And so you think like it wouldn't be very good. But I think part of the strength of that deck was like everyone would be expecting a certain thing based on the first couple cards he plays. And then his deck doesn't even go in that direction. It just goes in some other direction. And they can also refer to a card. So like a subcategory of jank would be like jank rare. And that would be a card like the Gontu that's in first chapter that nobody plays. It's super expensive. It's not that strong. And I think the ability is like characters less than 2 can't challenge it, which is like not a huge, like who cares? Next is mana weaving. So that is for Magic. And it is basically, it's cheating, first of all. Cheating. But it's where they, I guess in Magic, so they have like lands and they have like not lands. And so they will like do like, they'll make their deck so it's like land, not land, land, not land, or something like that. So basically that way when they, even if they shuffle, they will get like a good distribution of lands versus not lands. So in Lorcana, that would be like kind of like staggering your inkable cards versus your not inkable cards, or maybe like your 1-cost cards and your high cost cards kind of thing on purpose, like looking at them and doing that, and then trying to get like a good spread. Illegal. Don't do it. Okay. Next is to stabilize the board. So if you watch videos from those high level players, they will be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then you stabilize the board and then blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, what is that? They're like, once you stabilize the board, you can do this. And you're like, what does that mean? So stabilizing the board is when the defensive player has basically made it so that the aggressive player, so your opponent, can no longer make like a good trade, right? And so it's basically like, for example, red, purple, right? It's played a lot. When they've stabilized the board, it's basically like they have stuff on board that can deal. It's usually when they get to like 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe. They have stuff on board that like you play something, they can deal with it, right? You play whatever, they brawl it, they Medusa it, so that you can't get anything on board. And then they can quest with their other characters. Or like green steel. They have a bunch of stuff on board. Some of their characters have wards, so you can't get rid of them. Maybe they have muses. So they'll sing a song and just bounce your stuff. Usually it's just like when they have board controls, they can basically anything you play, they have an answer for. One way to kind of ruin their stabilizing the board part is if you have something like Be Prepared, or maybe Under the Sea, Kita Under the Sea, right? You get rid of their side. And so all of a sudden they no longer have board control. Their board is not stable. Another word that people will use is swing. So kind of two different usages for this. You can either swing into a character, which means you challenge that character, or it could refer to swing like where there's a big lore swing. So a big change in a big change in lore. So for example, like if they play Pirate's Life for me, basically that's a 4 lore swing. So whoever plays Pirate's Life gains 2, the opponent loses 2, and so that's a 4 lore swing. There could be a swing in hand size. So like if I'm playing green steel and I have Prince John and I play Hypnotize, you discard a card, I draw 2 cards because I have that Prince John on board. Maybe, yeah. And so then that's like a 3-card swing. So it can be used for swing, it can be used for lore. You can say like I'm swinging the game into my favor or something like that. Next would be trade up. And that's pretty much what it sounds like. So it's getting more out of an exchange. So that could either be like inside the game. So like maybe your 2-cost character trades for their 4-cost character. You would be trading up. So like they both get banished, but yours costs a lot less. You're trading up. Or it could be like actually trading cards. Like you get a card that's worth more than the card that you're trading for. And I think this is like a thing on YouTube for usually like Pokemon, where they'll start with like a cheap card during the day and then they'll just go around the convention and like trade until like at the end of the day they have like a much more expensive card because they constantly are trading up. Next is Tutor. So that is an actual card, I think, in Magic, and it's a card that lets you search for another card in your deck. So examples of tutor cards in Lorcana, we got our first one, which was Alma Madrigal. So she lets you search for another Madrigal. We got Merlin, who lets you search for any card. And then in this recent set, we got the Islands I pulled up from the sea, which lets you search for a location card. So those are all two. Another word that I've seen used a bunch, especially in memes and stuff, is sweats or sweaty. And that refers to somebody who is like a tryhard. So like they play very seriously and they want to win and they try really hard. And a lot of times it'll be a meme and be like, oh, I don't play there because there's too many sweats. And I don't want to discourage people from trying hard. I think it's important to try hard. But I feel like it usually refers to those people who are like so focused on doing well that they ignore like being nice to people, staying high. Like that person I played, I feel like I'm so scarred from that experience at Vegas where I played that person where I said hi and he didn't say hi back at all. He was just like doing math and calculating and stuff. So that's someone I would call a sweat because of like, dude, we're playing a Disney card game. Chill. Also, this isn't the main event. This is day 2, which means you lost, which I think probably is why that person was acting like that because they felt like they should have gotten into day 2. This is a loser's bracket, man. But anyways, that would be a sweat. Another one I have heard, especially if you're on, so the 20 lore Discord, they had like every set, they have all the different deck colors and people talk. And then red purple is always called like, you can't escape Jund or Jund is here forever or something like that. And that is from Magic. And I guess in Magic, there is a Jund shard that lets you gain card advantage and pressure your opponent. and also removes threats and kills stuff and plays some overpowered threats, which is very similar to the MO of red purple, because red purple lets you get card advantage from the purple side, and then the red side removes threats. Another term that you'll hear people say when they talk about new sets is power creep. And that's basically like it occurs in a game when the new cards are more powerful than the old cards and basically makes the old cards like useless. It's like, why would you play that old card that is weaker when you can play this new card that is better for the same cost? So that as a game does that, that's called power creep. And I feel like in Lorcana, there hasn't been too much of that. Yeah. And let's see, next, we'll say WR, win rate. That's just how much you won, the percentage you won. People will say bomb, call a card bomb. And it doesn't just mean that it's da bomb, but it is a card that is powerful enough on its own, or powerful enough, maybe not, but powerful enough to change the course. Yeah. Powerful enough on its own to change the course of the game. And sometimes that may be a card. I think usually that is used more in terms of limited. Like if you have this card, you're probably going to win. So it would be like B prep. Or if you're playing like first chapter B prep, maybe a whole new world would be really good. Having friends is really good. Maybe Lucky Die, maybe Mob Song in limited. Yeah. Just cards that can kind of change the course of the game on its own. Another thing that people talk about is homebrew. So that is a deck that you've made at home and it's not a meta deck. So the opposite of homebrew would be like the term net deck. So net deck is basically when you go on the net and you find someone's deck and you play that deck, or you take that deck, maybe you change it a little bit, and then that's your meta deck, right? Your net deck. You got it off the net. It's meta because it's kind of like a big share. A lot of people are playing it. It's good. That is one side. The other side is homebrew. So that's something you made at home, maybe something different. So I would say like my red-green deck I played at Battle of the Bay would be a homebrew. I made it myself with the help of Brian. Really, Brian made it himself, and then I tweaked it a little bit. And like there's a person in our locals who always plays homebrews. He plays a lot of red-green evasive decks. There's someone else who played like a red steel Nottingham. There was someone in our local school playing, this was last set, with just Sugar Rush Speedway starting line, kind of like his homebrew version. Yeah, so homebrew is just not a meta deck. And that's kind of, I think, all the terms I have left to go over. As always, let me know if there's anything you've heard from people that you don't understand what they're saying. If any of you guys play Gary, who is on our team, I feel like I should issue a warning. He calls everything by their species name, not by the card. So if he says, this is another word that I've only really heard him use, where he says row, and I think it means to challenge. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think actually, no, it means to ink. Yeah, it means to ink. And I couldn't find it online because I literally had just asked him. I think it means to ink. But if you ever play him, he doesn't use the card name. So sometimes he'll say like, oh, my fox will attack your fox. And then your fox will be Robin Hood, and his fox will be like Madam Mim Fox. And I feel like the Madam Mim characters are the only ones where his species name thing actually makes sense, because of like Madam Mim Elephant, or Merlin Goat, or Merlin Crab. You know, that makes sense. But in other cases, you're just like, who are you talking about? Because you'll be like Fox or Robin Hood, or like, oh, the dog. And you're like, what card is that? What card is the dog? Yeah. Or he'll be like, the duck. And you're like, which Donald Duck, Daisy Duck, which duck? So yeah, it's very funny to play with him, but also sometimes a little like, what are you talking about? Or he'll be like, the bird. And you're like, do you mean Diablo, that bird? Which I kind of want to see him play against like a broom deck. And he's going to be like, the broom. And you're like, which broom? They're all brooms. Everyone's a broom. Which broom? Yeah. So that is it for this video. Those are all the new terms I have. As always, like, comment, subscribe down below. Let me know what else you guys want me to go over. And I feel a ADHD hyperfixation coming on, so I feel like there's going to be a lot more new videos in the near future. All right, as always, keep shuffling. Hopefully you don't end up with a whole handful of non-inkables like me. Check out our TCG store.